Thank you for those of you who showed up. Much appreciated. Today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be showing a video of Matt and Dwight talking about the use of cover crops and biologicals and how we can use those to increase farm sustainability and soil biology. So with that being said, we can type our questions into the chat as things go along. Matt and Dwight are here, so after this video has commenced, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and they can kind of field these questions that you may have, and I guess we can go from there. So with that being said, Craig, I saw you come off mute. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, right now.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, I will go ahead and start this recording. Please let me know if you're not able to hear it or if there's something going wrong technical wise. But we will go ahead and get started here. Matt, if you just want to shoot me in a chat if you're able to hear it or not, that'd be much appreciated.
So I always try to help farmers of any age, but I've helped a lot of farmers for years. I feel I have. I try to. I want to share the knowledge that I've gained through the lifetime of farming.
Matt, you said you're not able to hear it now?
Correct. That's correct.
I'm not hearing it either.
Let me try this. I just shared sound. We'll see if this works.
Just tell us a little bit about your operation
There
and
you
how you
go.
got started
Perfect.
in conservation agriculture, maybe why you got started.
Sure. Well, I started this in 1982. I was always intrigued by the idea. When I was in 4-H, I won a trip to conservation camp, and they took us to one of the first no-till fields, I believe it was in Knox County. And so as I started farming full-time or as a living, that always was in the back of my mind, and I went with that. Mm-hmm.
What were some of the challenges that you noticed, right off the beginning? Sometimes there can be slugs, there can be moles, or wet soils. What were some of the challenges you faced?
Well, I would say the first challenge any farmer, especially in the beginning when they face it, is probably their confidence. Worrying about making a mistake, what will my neighbors think? You kind of got to throw that off to the side and go with your instinct and be educate yourself. As far as agronomics go, they vary with region. Some areas do have slugs and some areas do have voles. Those tend to come and go seasonally. I mean, not seasonally, but some years you could have an issue and some years you won't. So it was really just that learning curve and developing the confidence to know that you can keep going forward.
Okay. When I started on this journey, I didn't know you at the time, mm-hmm. and I would read a lot in magazines, and YouTube and some of those informational sources weren't as popular then. And when I started planting cover crops, I planted the cover crop in the fall, and then come spring, I had a lot of questions, and I contacted 2 different local co-ops, and neither one had the answers that I needed. So I struggled through that, and then a year or 2 later, then I met you. What were your What were your thoughts or your perception when I started calling you with these questions?
Well, I was real happy to see a young farmer with enthusiasm wanting to move forward in this direction. So I always tried to help farmers of any age, but I've helped a lot of farmers through the years. I feel I have. I try to. I want to share the knowledge that I've gained through the lifetime of farming. There's been mistakes, and if you didn't make a mistake, you weren't farming. It's going to happen. So I made a few doozies. Back when I started, there was not the sources of information that we have today. One thing I would caution farmers is when you read articles, not every article, how do I say this, is maybe fully correct for your situation.
Right.
So the best thing I would say to a farmer is find a farmer or a cover crop seed dealer who's been doing it a long time like we have, and work with them individually and build off of that system that works.
A lot of our soils are pretty degraded. They're pretty dead. Can you elaborate on kind of like the biological system that you've talked about and how the soil is alive? When I was growing up, I knew we had earthworms, but I didn't know there was that much life under the soil. And you've taught me a lot about that. But can you elaborate how the biological system works, not only using biological products, but just how there is life under the soil?
Well, I'm glad you said that because it really is a journey. When I first started as a young man, I started with no-till and experimenting with some cover crops. And when I basically thought with the no-till, boy, I got it all figured out. And I had no idea it was the first step in a journey over my life. I tell people iron and chemistry gives you dirt, biology gives you soil. And so another example I give is that only biology builds soil. So tillage degrades it, heavy chemistry use degrades it, biology improves it, makes it better. So I tell people if you want to make your farm better, your soils better and more productive, then you want to build biology in your soils. So it's all interacted. It's really a system where you have microbes and earthworms and plants, and they all interact. For example, earthworms in a 10-year period will turn up about 8 inches of your topsoil, just gradually doing it because they have to eat soil to digest raw organic matter. And dew worm droppings are very high in nutrients because they have the organic matter they broke down, as well as when you run that soil through their intestine, it releases the nutrients that are tied up. So that's part of that biological system. The last time I had heard, there was around 180,000 microbes identified, and I'm sure that's probably higher now than it was then. Most microbes are beneficial, and once you get healthy soils, usually your beneficial microbes will outweigh and suppress the ones that aren't. So you want to buy biologically enhancing products and systems and get away from the chemistry and the iron to improve your biology.
What benefit do you see on your farm being 40 years into this with using some of those biological products?
Well, I've just been continually getting better. I know I wondered quite a few years ago, I wonder when I'll hit a plateau. I have not hit a plateau yet. Our soils, as a rule in this country, have been really treated badly. And we are growing a vast amount of food that is nutrient deficient because we're pushing it with chemistry and not pushing with biology. Then that's really a very important, more than people realize, in their food supply. We're really growing a lot of nutrient deficient food.
You explain how the nutrients and the microbes and the plants work together. Like you've shown that on the marker board. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yes. Well, about 50% of the sugars that plants produce are exuded through the root system to feed the microbes. And in nature, nothing does something for free for somebody else. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So the plants exude this sugar. It's kind of say it coated. And the plant is telling the microbes, I need some phosphorus or I need some potash. And those microbes then bring those nutrients to your plants, because your plants only take up nutrients from the soil particles they touch. So if you have, say, 2 corn roots and they're a ½ inch apart, and you have done a soil test, and that soil probe went right down through there, the nutrients that are in between those roots is available for the corn plant to get, except the corn plant can't get it. And that's where the microbes come in. And it allows you to reduce the fertilizers you buy, and makes it much more efficient. Salt is very, very hard on microbes, which the 2 worst ones, of course, are nitrogen and potash. They're the worst of the 3. So we took in 92, we did a pretty extensive experimentation here. We did soil testing on 1,000 acres, 0 to 2 and 2 to 8, and we did it 2 years in a row. And I quit applying the commercial granular salt-based fertilizers you get at your local co-op. As those salts cleansed out, now I was already no-tilling and randomly using cover crops, but what we noticed is as salts cleansed out of that soil, my nutrients went up. And that's because I had microbial levels went up. And they went up and they have stayed there. And actually they've gotten back into balance, because I wanted, when I was doing tillage and using these products, I would soil test and apply them, and I would try to get for every pound of phosphorus I had available, I wanted 10 pounds of potash available, and I could never reach that. And a few years ago, I had a field day here, and I took a soil sample, which I don't do very much because I don't apply soil-based fertilizers, the P and K. And it came back 40 pounds of phosphorus and 400 pounds of potash, and the biology put it back into balance. I could never do that when I was doing the soil testing and applying it. So that kind of put it back into balance. We've had testing here on infiltration studies of water. I gave them our Napanee. We have Napanee in Hoytville here. If you look up Napanee in the soil survey books, it's very low permeability and very slow water absorption. And out of the test of about 25 farms in 5 counties, we was the top farm for absorption in a Napanee soil. Matter of fact, the researchers told me it couldn't be Napanee. And I said, well, it is, check it out. But that comes from the soils getting healthy again. Well, we've had instances where we have big rains, and I had shared this with you in the past. And on one side of the road where they're doing the heavy tillage and a lot of chemistry was a lake, and the water was just running over the shoulder into the ditch. And across the road was our field, and there was no water laying in it. And that was the difference, and that was with a 5-inch rain. You use these cover crops, you'll find that there is a whole list of benefits for that cover crop. Not just, well, it stops soil erosion, or you get a payment, or, adding some organic matter. There's a whole list of things. And once you get a biological system together, it just gets better and better and better, because things start working together and getting into balance. And Mother Nature had this all figured out long before we came along. If you look at a woods, or say a wetland up along Lake Erie where there's cattails, those are in balance and there's no nutrient deficiencies. And one of the reasons is there's always living roots under the soil. And not everything I did was successful. I know I had been raising corn in mammoth red clover and had great success. And then one year we worked till midnight to get the corn in before rain came, and then it stayed wet for 2 weeks, and they never got the mammoth clover sprayed, and it stood back up, and it's waist high, and it smothered, I don't remember how many acres, but it smothered most of the corn out. And then it was kind of too late to do anything else, so I had this real sparse corn stand out there, and I had neighbors stopping and looking at it and thinking I was crazy, of course. But I called that my college education money. And if I would have failed and had that mishap and then stopped, I would have failed. That would have been a failure to me. I said, what can I learn from that so it don't happen again? So what I did was I switched from mammoth red clover to medium red clover. So I didn't have as much mass growth out there. And now, as you go down the road, I don't use pure clover. I use a blend. And I would say that in cover crops, diversity is really good. I like it in almost everything except cereal rye, where you're going to plant soybeans. That's the one that I like to plant pure cereal rye with nothing with it. Because if you plant cereal rye thin enough that you can grow another plant, then you can grow a water hemp, a mare's tail, giant ragweed. Because the cereal rye is a great weed suppressor. But if you get it too thin, it can't do that. And so I recommend planting cereal rye heavier than say the farm office does, or even some other cover crop people. But it goes back to understanding the whole picture of the cereal rye, and what I want to accomplish with it is more than one thing. So diversity amongst the cover crops is important. And then understanding where they fit is another one. I remember we talked about articles, and I was reading an article in a magazine one time, and it was out north of Interstate 80 in Iowa, and they did a whole article about how cover crops wouldn't work there, and then they told what they planted. And I just shook my head, because they should have never planted that at that time of year in northern Iowa. See, so they come out with an article that makes it sound like this doesn't work, and the fact is they didn't do things correctly, and that's what you got to watch for. Quite a few years ago, there was an article come out, and they interviewed a farmer, and he said, my cereal rye got away from me, got tall. Everybody started talking about cereal rye getting away from them. Most years we're planting in 4 or 5, 6 foot tall cereal rye, and we love it. It doesn't get away from you. It's just you need to understand the biology, how it grows, how it functions, and you work with that. And the thing with the slugs, here's a mistake that farmers are making, because, you know, think about this. Farm publications come to your house for free. Well, somebody's paying for that, and that's the advertisers, and they're advertising chemicals and iron and, you know, everything else. So if you use insecticides, whether it's post-spray on your crop or on your seed, what you're really killing is the predators. And years ago, this is another mistake I made years ago. I thought, well, I'll be preemptive instead of reactive. Well, the first thing I noticed is I didn't have any predators. So we used to combine beans, and you'd see the big old praying mantis flying around the bean field. None. So what we do is we kill off the wolf spiders, the praying mantises, there's beetles that eat slugs, and the insecticides don't kill the slugs. Matter of fact, they can carry that insecticide in their body, and if a predator does eat them, it'll kill that predator. So we create our own problems there because we think we know better than nature many times. So that's another reason that I eliminated seed treatment, because they had insecticide now on them, they have fungicides on them, and they have nematodes on them. There are good nematodes, there are wonderful funguses, and so on, you know. So, well, we had some folks that were not enthusiastic about cover crops. And a year or so ago, I hired them to plant for me because my wife got hurt. He didn't know if he could plant through my rye, and he had a big John Deere air seeder, and I said, you'll do just fine. He came to my house after replanting some of his beans first, and he said, boy, the ground's hard. I can barely get the drill in the ground. I said, you won't have that trouble here. And he looked at me like, you know, this guy's... So we get him started, and I got him to planting the depth I wanted the seed planted at, which is beans and corn. I like to have at least 2 inches deep. As a general rule, there are exceptions. And by the time he got to my second field, he says, our soil's nothing like your soil. And then every time he moved to the next farm, he would say, boy, this is really good soil. And I would say, it wasn't when I got the farm. You know, most of the farms I've had for 25, 35 years. And I would tell him the same thing. I'd say, when I got this farm, it wasn't. It was hard, it was weedy, low organic matter, it was gray instead of black, that type of thing. So after planting my crop for me, he came in the house and sat down and talked cover crops. So that was, in that case, was a good way for that person to actually witness it, because he was out there with his own equipment on my fields of 40 some years, you know. So it's leading by example. Farmers that are doing this, such as yourself or me, I never let negative comments stop me. You know, there's going to be negative comments. There's people going to think you're nuts. That's okay. Maybe I am a little nuts. I don't know. Depends who you ask. But you got to believe in yourself. You got to be enthusiastic. You got to have confidence. You build the confidence. And again, above all, learn how biology works. Once you learn that, then you have confidence. Then you can have a discussion with somebody who's negative.
I think you're exactly right. Just a few years ago, I had a neighbor. He pulled into the field. I was filling my drill with cover crop seed, and he pulled into the field and he said, "Hey, what are you planting here?" And I explained to him what I was planting, and he said, "For about the last 2 or 3 years, every time I drive by this field, I notice the crops are greener, they're more healthy." You know, so not only, you know, in some of our presentations, we have pictures of different soil health pictures, but something else we're getting into with the Nature Conservancy is the Haney soil test. And that's been a real eye-opener for me. I've tested one of my fields, and then I tested another field, and just to see the differences of the biological activity in my field versus the other field, the organic nutrients that's available, the soil health test score, that was a real eye-opener to me. I was actually able to share that with some landowners a couple times this week, and that was a real eye-opener. So I sometimes, when I'm at a meeting and have a presentation, one of the first things I'll ask the group is, in your area, what is the annual rate of soil erosion? And usually I get crickets. Farmers and landowners don't know.
No.
In Ohio, the annual rate of soil erosion is around 2.7 tons per acre. That just makes me sick.
Yeah.
Why would we want to do that?
I got some statistics for Seneca County, and they said that full tillage was 2.5 tons the acre. Now, this is probably 25, 30 years ago when I got these numbers. If you went to no-till, you drop that to 0.5 ton an acre. If you add a cover crop, and when I want to put an asterisk there, if you add a correct seeded rate cover crop, so it's not just a few plant, but you add a cover crop out there, you can drop that 0.5 ton by 90%. So you can almost eliminate soil erosion with the no-till and the cover crops. When you eliminate the soil erosion, you eliminate the nutrients that leave with that soil as well. And your best soil is what erodes. Makes you more profitable. I'm always telling farmers, we need to quit thinking of our success in bushels per acre and think of the success in the dollars that you get to keep after you pay your expenses. You know, and this has made it possible for me. You know, I feel I'm going to leave the farms better off than when I got them. And one of the things I'll mention too, when I was, you know, back in the 80s and I was the only one doing this, and everybody thought that it was just crazy doing this, and nobody would rent me a farm, nobody with good land. And I wound up renting a bunch of really poor farms that nobody wanted. They'd be on the bulletin board at the elevator for 2 weeks. I was working in town, I wanted to farm, so I took these poor farms, and that was catch-22 for me, because I turned them around and made a living off these poor farms. Now, not every farm I had was poor, but I had a lot of them, high percentage. But I turned them into good farms. They were still wet farms, but now they had healthy soils. And I turned them to the point where then people started going after those farms to take them away from me, the same farm that they had passed up 20 years before that had been on the bulletin board at the elevator for 2 weeks. And what they would do is come in and rip that field up and go right back doing what they were doing. And the other thing, since they were wet farms, I always waited till they were fit. And I didn't care if everybody else was done planting or not. When they got fits, when I planted them, and that's what brought them back to life. Because before, everybody, well, the calendar is May 15th, I got to get it in, they'd go in and mud through it. And same thing at harvest. And I would actually wait until it froze if I had to go in and harvest that crop. So then that got you know, in the neighborhood, well, he's always the last guy done, you know? And I would say, well, if you look at my good farms, they're all in the same time yours are, the ones that are tiled and everything. I refuse to abuse the bad ones, you know, because that's how they got to be as bad as they were. So patience is important too.
Great. Thank you, Matt and Dwight. For those of you still on here, Bryce does have a question. Bryce, as I get that pulled up, I'm going to ask a question of my own. And so, Dwight, you mentioned towards the end of that video that it's not about bushels per acre. Obviously, return on investment is the important thing. Obviously, as a farmer, that's extremely important. And if someone were wanting to make a transition, I guess what are some things that they can expect in that first 3 years? And are there any helpful tips that you could give to someone wanting to, I guess, pursue this transition? And before you answer, Dwight or Matt, would you mind giving just a quick little introduction? Sorry, I forgot to give you the opportunity for that.
Okay.
I'm Dwight Clary. I farm in Seneca and Sandusky County, or I did. I've retired from farming. I've been doing the no-till, the cover crops for, I think, 42 continuous years now. So like I said in the video, I've made mistakes and I've had good successes, but you learn from your mistakes. So that's kind of been my journey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Burkholder. I farm in Allen County, Ohio, and I also work with the Nature Conservancy as a part of the Farmer Advocate Program.
Hi, I'm Craig Bowser. I farm in Alglace County. Been doing no-till for going on 36 years. Cover crop, basically I started about 10 years ago and I went full cover crop with mixtures about 5 years ago. And things are really showing up pretty good. Got rid of all the big equipment down to maybe one big tractor, planter, combine, wagons, and that's about it.
So I think you're headed in the right direction, that's for sure.
Yeah, so do I. There's not too many guys right down in this area that's doing full cover crop right now. I've talked to Matt once before on voicemail or texting and stuff, and come up with some pretty good ideas on what to plant. And I'm not too sure. I'm still like everybody else. I'm trying things differently, doing different mixtures. On corn, from beans going to corn, what do you guys most likely put as your cover crop? Matt, any idea?
Well, you know, you're a little different situation because you have some experience, but if it was a new grower that have never planted into cover crop before, I always encourage them, to go with oats and radish just to get used to their planter, get used to how their planter is going to react in the soil and planting into a little bit of residue. But, you're a little bit more advanced. So, you've got some more options. You could do annual ryegrass, crimson clover, and radish. You could do winter barley, crimson clover and radish, or, if you have wheat in your rotation, you've got all kinds of options there. So maybe Dwight's got some more insight on this too.
Well, I have 2 blends that I recommend in the fall. I'm a cover crop seed dealer and have been for quite a few years. One of them would be surface seeded, like flown into standing beans. And the other one would be drilled after the harvest of beans. So I use different species in those. If you're going to drill after harvest, of course, there are time limits. You have to have your crop off in a pretty good time. Usually the first half of October, if you have a nice fall. With that one, I use winter peas, a little bit of cereal rye, a little bit of barley, and some winter oats. Now, if you're in the farm program, we have to change that a little bit because they do not take and count winter oats and winter peas as overwintering crops. So you have to get that blend and adjustment. In that case, I use rye, barley, and pea. Excuse me, but you have to have the right percentages. For the one that we fly in, I would use winter oats. Vetch is my legume. Maybe some barley with that, maybe just a little bit of rye. Now, the thing I would caution you on using rye before corn, I don't like rye before corn as a pure cover crop. You can have problems with that, I believe. There are guys that have done it successfully. But as a general rule, a little rye, like a seasoning in a recipe, is fine. If you get too much rye, you could have some allelopathic effect on your corn. So I rarely put over in the blend with the barley, rye, and oats. I might only have 8 or 9 pounds of rye out of that mix, out of those three. So you want to be cautious on that. The thing I would caution everybody on is be very careful on the herbicides you buy. If you use these herbicides can carry over, so you need to really talk to your agronomist what he's going to use and be aware. The rule of thumb I use, because they have not done a lot of studies on herbicides on cover crops. So I ask them, can I plant wheat after that herbicide in the fall? Even though I'm not going to plant wheat, I'm going to plant rye or barley or something like that. So if you can plant wheat, you can plant the rye and barley. I ask them, what's the time period before I can plant alfalfa? Now, they might say, well, you're not going to plant alfalfa in the fall that late. Well, that's not the point. The point is, if the chemical allows you to plant alfalfa, if the time window is available, then your vetches and stuff will survive. If it says, no, you can't plant alfalfa to 18 months, then you need to change your chemicals. And there, you can do it if you take your time and research the chemicals. I mean, we do it. I also would like to add too on the chemicals. I like to split my chemicals where I put some down at burn down, a few, and then I always have a planned post application. So you can cover if you have an escape problem. You're not putting all your eggs out there at the beginning and then have another issue come up. So that's helpful.
What are you guys planning as far as pounds per acre on your cover crop?
Well, on the blend of the peas, barley, winter oats, and rye, I plant a total of 40 pounds. If you're not in the farm program, I use that blend, but I plant 40 pounds. That gives me 20 pounds of peas, and they produce a lot of nitrogen. So, you know, you don't want to step over a dime to save a penny. You understand what you're getting, the benefits from these cover crops, like the nitrogen. You know, that's worth a lot. And then every cover crop's different too. You know, the one we fly on is a little different. So it varies with the cover crop and what you plant.
Well, this year I went anything from 50 to 60 pounds per acre. I was down 40 and I thought, well, I'll see what this does. And we're going from there, just to find out whether I'm really putting on. Pardon?
What did you plant?
What was
40
that?
pounds?
That was corn going to beans. I did cereal rye, essence rape, hairy vetch, crimson clover, and sun hemp. Mixture of
well,
it.
And you drilled that after corn harvest?
This year I did. Year before, last year 22, I put one of them air seeders on the combine and corn head, and I basically broadcast it. I had real good luck with the corn. I had this cover crop going into the corn. Excuse me, on the beans, we didn't get the rain down here to get it really started. And then in the spring, it did come up all right. So in other words, I broadcasted last year. I drilled this year because I had medical problems. I couldn't get in to do it and stuff. So I had some other guys come in and take the crops off, and then we drilled it.
Okay.
Brent, do you have any more questions? Any more comments, Brent?
Yes, so Bryce did have a question. Bryce, feel free to come off mute if you want. I did find the portion in the video that you were referencing. Would you like me to play that, Bryce, or do you just want to ask that off the top of your head?
I was just curious which form of nitrogen might have the least amount of salt in it, or what you felt was the best to use, whether it be dry urea or 28, or obviously everyone says anhydrous is bad.
Yeah, I don't recommend anhydrous because it's really hard on the biology. Of course, the salts and the others are too. What I try to do on our farm, think about this. If you're raising a cover crop and you have a legume that's going to produce nitrogen, that nitrogen that is organically produced by the plant doesn't have salt in it, and it's more stable in the soil. So ideally, you want to give credit to your cover crop for nitrogen. And you want to remember this, if you have a blend, not only do you get nitrogen from the legumes, but your scavengers take up nitrogen and put them into the organic matter. That gets processed back into the system as well. So we use a little ammonia sulfate and 28%. We're farther along in this system than most farmers. A lot of years, we only have to buy 120 pounds, 140 pounds of nitrogen to raise our full crop, where my neighbors are buying maybe 200 pounds worth of nitrogen. So that goes back to dollars that you keep in your wallet. And so there's several things. There's other products that we use on our farm called zeolite, which captures and holds nitrogen for you. It's volcanic ash. It's not a chemical. So there's several things you can do to keep your nitrogen on the field. Soybeans, you'll have about 2 pounds the acre of nitrogen after harvest. If you raise 60 bushel beans, you should have about 120 pounds of nitrogen on that field for the next spring, except half of that gets lost over winter. That's where cover crop comes in. So the scavengers will take up that nitrogen and put it in the organic matter, like I just said, and you can capture and keep that. So whatever way you can capture and keep nitrogen on your field, you don't have to buy so much the next spring. That reduces the salt supply or salt input into your soils. I quit in 1992. I quit buying granular potash and phosphorus, the salt-based fertilizers. I haven't used those since that testing I talked about, and we have not depleted our soils. They went up and stabilized, and so there's tons of this fertilizer that's tied up in the soils, and the only way to get it available is with biology.
Thanks, Dwight.
Great. I guess any more questions? We are at time, but we can stay on, keep recording. If Matt and Dwight, you don't have any prior engagements.
Yeah, we're good if there's a few more questions.
Okay.
I
And
just hope Dwight read my comment there in the comments section.
I just did.
One thing I'll say real fast here is, like I said in the video, Dwight was my farmer advocate before the farmer advocate program began. He kind of got me started on this journey and helped me to just have an awareness of how we can be a help to other farmers and to be helpful to our neighbors. So now at this time, I have farmers contact me every week, call or text, and so Dwight and I are always available. So feel free to contact us anytime with any questions, or I'd be glad to come out and visit with you at your farm, take a look at your soils, get a shovel out and do some digging, and that's what the Farmer Advocate program is all about.
Great. Well, thank you both. If there's no other further questions, we can go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you all for joining. It's really appreciated. The recording will be available on YouTube. However, if you are registered, I'll just send you the recording direct once it gets uploaded onto my account. So with that being said, I'll just go ahead and end recording. Thank you all and have a good rest of your day.